In your 2-year project to get perceptions from all these different countries, there's one country that seems to be kind of outside the normal pattern, right? And that's Tonga.
Okay, I knew you were heading towards Tonga, but
So firstly, two questions. One is, what's Tonga?
What's Tonga?
And secondly, why did you choose Tonga? And I guess thirdly, what did you find?
So we picked Tonga. Tonga is a country in the South Pacific, population of about 100,000 people, never been colonized. It was the center of a thalassocratic empire, well, not really like empire in terms of colonies, but it was culturally important around the region for a very long time. It still has a monarchy. It's the last remaining Polynesian kingdom. It has a military. They've served in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The royal family has relationships not just with the royal families around the region, like the Maori king or the major houses in Samoa, but also globally. So when the last king of Tonga had his coronation in 2015, the current emperor and empress of Japan came to Tonga for the coronation. So it has a kind of an unusual reach in terms of foreign policy. And because they have essentially kind of a permanent foreign policy establishment, they've been dealing with foreign powers coming into the region since the initial colonial period. So the current king is a direct descendant from the king who negotiated the treaty with the Americans that when they came in, and with the British when they came in, and they know how geopolitics affects their region and how to balance powers. And they're very similar to a lot of other countries in the region that are quite small population-wise, but are highly strategically located. China has been very focused about gaining toeholds across the Oceania region. And I think in part because they looked at what Japan's weakness was, which was it didn't consolidate the islands before it attacked Pearl Harbor. And the Americans fought back with the help of Australians, New Zealanders, and other Pacific Islanders, island by island, to hem back in Japan. So China is in the process of setting up toeholds, economic and political, at least initially, in the islands across the Pacific for an eventuality, I would suspect, of pushing the US back to Hawaii. And this was something that was overtly said by one of the Chinese leaders, said to one of the American naval guys, you guys can take Hawaii east and we'll take Hawaii west. And this goes back to conceptualizations that Japan had. The Chinese military infrastructure does something very interesting, which is they study defeats. They study why the Soviet Union fell apart. They study why Japan lost and try to put themselves in a position where they're not going to get hit by those same vulnerabilities. And one of the key elements of that is control over at least key elements of Oceania. Because as they try to break out of the first island chain and the second island chain, if you can attack the first island chain, not just from the front, but from the back, then you're in a much better position, which is also why seeing the U.S. outreach to Palau, for example, and incorporating the U.S.-Palau-Taiwan relationship into a strategy is so important, because it counters that Chinese activity. So we wanted to go to Tonga, which is one of these countries that's kind of on this diplomatic front line, to hear from them what they think of the contestation between China and the others, and what they like about the Chinese engagement, what they don't like, what they like about engagement from Australia, New Zealand, US, and others, what they don't like, to figure out how everybody can understand each other's perceptions and work together more efficiently.
So what did you find out?
So what we found out was the increased interest from China has, at least in the short term, benefited Tonga because it gives them a better negotiating position when they're dealing with other countries like Australia and New Zealand. The problem is that the Australia and New Zealand outreach has had issues, which is how you end up with countries like the Solomon Islands and Kiribati in 2019 switching from Taiwan to China, because the Australia-New Zealand element of it has some deficiencies. So what they actually want is they want more direct American engagement politically, and they want more economic engagement from India, because they think that the Indian economy and the Tongan economy have a lot of compatibility. This is, again, this kind of low cost engagement. They want better connectivity to India so that their students can go study at Indian universities, which are lower cost and just as good and more culturally compatible. And the same thing for healthcare. But the problems that they have with the India-Tonga compatibility is currently now most of the flights go through Australia and New Zealand. So when we were there was an Indian who runs a university in India who was going to come to Tonga to have discussions with the Ministry of Education. But she couldn't get a New Zealand visa in time in order to catch the flight. So that barrier, that connectivity barrier around visas and around flights is an impediment for creating that relationship. And also Australia and New Zealand, quite frankly, their business sector at least, don't want other outside economic elements coming in. Their strategic community hopefully understands that if India comes in, it reduces the Chinese influence in the economy and perhaps increases prosperity, stability, and security so that China becomes less of a factor. But if they look at it through a very narrow lens, this could decrease Australian and New Zealand influence in the region, then they have no incentive for facilitating a Tonga-India growth in relationship or even a Tonga-US growth in relationship.
So didn't Tonga take a China loan recently?
Well, it did. It wasn't quite that recent, but it did take a big China loan. And it's something that's brought up a lot in the context of sort of sovereignty. And the question came up at the roundtable. Somebody brought up, well, what do we do about this, the China loan? And the guy from the Ministry of Revenue said, well, if you want to deal with the China loan, then start paying your taxes. And it turns out that one of the problems that Tonga has is it has a very inefficient domestic tax collection scheme. And the Ministry of Revenue wants to get an automated system to aid in tax collection, in particular from the ethnically Chinese owned or run shops in Tonga. But 90% of the retail sector is controlled by recently arrived ethnic Chinese, and they're not paying their taxes. So they need a better IT system to collect taxes from those shops. But the IT system that they're looking at is about $10 million and they can't afford it. So from a security perspective, if you want to help Tonga deal with its China loan, what you need to do is help them get access to a low-cost IT tax collection system. So it's those sort of things that came out when you actually go to the countries and talk to them about what their real problems are, that you can kind of figure out entry points that weren't expected that might facilitate a real shift in strategic alignment if you can action them effectively.
They should import a system that everyone in Tonga fears by hiring the IRS.
Yeah, well, I think that would be fun, but hopefully they're not going to import the Chinese Communist Party system that everybody fears.
No, that would be far worse than the IRS. And I don't say that lightly.